Hey, guess what? That's right. We're gonna do some pottery. Now, to do any kind of ceramics or pottery or earthenware, you typically need to have some kind of clay. I didn't feel like going outside and digging in the dirt, so I cheated and I went ahead and bought some. If you go ahead and look on the back, you see that kitty litter pretty much just is clay. Yours may or may not have some kind of smell to it or fragrance or perfume. On top of that, I don't know what kind of clay this is. I've heard that some are made out of bentonite clay, and according to the brief education that I got on Wikipedia, bentonite clay is used for pottery. I have never done this before, and I have no idea if it's going to work, but we're gonna find out. It kind of smells like toothpaste. Try not to make too much of a mess. Well, that's pretty much what you get for $2 of 20 pounds of, no, excuse me, it's 10 pounds. Yes. So that's what $2 buys you. 10 pounds of crumbly clay stuff. I intend to make this clay stuff into some kind of pottery stuff, but if it doesn't work, then I'm not terribly disappointed. There we go. Now, before I make too much more of a mess, I think I'm going to go ahead and lay down some newspaper. I'm also going to reposition the camera because you really can't see what I'm doing. Right, I think that looks a little bit better. Alright, first off, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to get a small pile of this, get it wet, and see what I'm working with. I've also got a little bit of water in my little paper cup. It's fizzing, can you hear it? That's kind of cool. I think I used a little bit too much water, but it looks like it is turning into kind of a paste, so that's a good sign. Let's give this a little bit of a mix. It's not quite turning into a clay in the sense that you might usually think of clay. I was kind of going for like a modeling clay sort of consistency, and that's not really what I'm seeing here. It's almost kind of like an oatmeal. Okay, hang on. I take that back. It seems once I mush up the granules a little bit, I am getting some kind of paste or dough. So, okay, well, with that in mind, if I were to add a little bit of effort into mushing up some of these granules, maybe I can get a large enough size of clay that I can do some shaping with. I've seen people use an old blender to turn some of this kitty litter clump into a little bit of a powder, and I think if you were to do that before adding water, you'd probably have some pretty good paste to start out with. I don't exactly have a blender or anything like that, but I am going to try to break down some of these large crystals before adding water, because water just makes things really runny and crumbly. I don't know. I'll see what I can do. It's definitely no silly putty or Play-Doh, but it is starting to mush together pretty nicely. There we go. All right, two things I've learned already so far. One, I added too much water, and it's very soupy. That's only going to make drying and firing that much more involved. And two, hang on, what was two? Oh, right. These granules are kind of impeding the ability for all of the clay to just mush together. And I need a way to make this a little bit more uniform. Now, instead of getting it wet first, I'm going to try to pulverize it and then add water and see what I get. Here's what I got so far. It's no vase, but I'm kind of hopeful. Hey, check this out. After just wiping off my fingers, I was able to drain or wring most of the water out, and here's what I've got. It's malleable, and it seems like it's staying together pretty well. Now, it is still a little bit crumbly, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do as far as having it bind together. I can only imagine there's a couple of artistic viewers watching and cringing at what I'm doing. Oh well. Please bear with, I'm learning. Oh, nice. We got clay. Right, so we've gotten pretty good results so far. We've got some kind of clumping going on here. However, the granules that it comes in are causing a little bit of crumbling, and it's not really coagulating very well. So what I want to do is try to reduce the size of it, make it a little bit more uniform before adding water, and hopefully I'll get a much smoother, much stickier paste. So I'm just going to try to do some basic crushing with it and see what I get. Using a blender is probably going to be a little bit better. I'm not sure what these little blue bits are or if I need them. I'm trying to slowly put my weight on top of it and grind it down that way, because it seems like whenever I just kind of swing at it, it doesn't really crumble. It really just kind of like flies everywhere. So I'm trying to keep it pretty contained. Okay, I think that actually looks pretty good. If I wanted to, I could maybe sift some of this. Actually, I think I might do that. I've got this splatter shield that you would typically put on top of a frying pan. But if you've got a window screen, I think that would also work pretty well. If anyone's curious, I think this is roughly 14 mesh. It didn't have anything on the label, but that's what I roughly measured it to be. It's definitely not air float, but it's pretty fine. Let's go ahead and get it wet. Yeah, right away it's turning into a pretty fine paste. Granted, it's still a little bit wet and runny, but we can, just wring that out. This looks pretty good. So I got so far. I'd say this is maybe the consistency of it. I guess it does kind of feel a little bit like wet sand. It's well, I mean, first it's very wet and messy, but it also has that gritty texture to it as well. However, as we saw just a second ago, once we wring the water out of this, it seems like it's going to stay together pretty well. Hopefully, that will still be the case whenever we go to fire it. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and moisten the rest of this up now. I'm not really sure about the measurements that I'm making with the water versus the media. What I'm trying to do is add basically just enough water to darken the color. However, I don't want to go crazy and add too much water because that's just more that I'll have to remove later. We can see that we've got the dry stuff over here and then the wet stuff over here. I'll just keep gradually adding in some moisture, keep mixing all of this up, and hopefully we'll get more paste. The paste looks pretty smooth so far. Let me just go ahead and collect all of it together and then I'll wring it out. Oh man, that's beautiful. Look at that. So nice and uniform. It's got a good color to it. I am feeling really good about this. I just pressed the coarse grain blob as well, and I think it turned out just as nice. And that's a good thing to know because that's going to save me a lot of processing. I don't have to go through and pulverize all of this litter. Instead, I can just kind of put it into some kind of container, get it wet, mush it together, and then I can start modeling it. Very nice. Okay, this part might take a while, so I think I'll just go ahead and cut here and come back to you when I'm done. Okay, it's been a little over 10 minutes now, and so far the small bit of clay that I've moistened is coming together pretty nicely. It's still got quite a bit of grainy texture to it, but that seems to be thinning out and smoothing out with the more water I add to it. I'm not sure how far I'm supposed to take this. I guess that's really just on whatever sort of consistency that I'm satisfied with. But afterwards, I think I'm going to try to fire up my oven. Hopefully see if I can hit the right sort of necessary temperatures, and then hopefully I can turn this into a solid piece of whatever. It's been about 45 minutes later, and here's pretty much the point where I've chosen to come to a stopping point. This is about the only thing I can make that would somehow retain its shape. Anything else seems to just kind of crumble and fall apart. I've noticed that no matter how much water I add to it, it's still not quite sticky enough to overcome that crumbly characteristic. At first I thought it was just the high grain of this particular batch, but then I tried to go over here with the finely sifted stuff, and I found that once that dried, this is just as crumbly. I don't know if I'm supposed to add some kind of fiber into it to give it some extra strength, maybe kind of like a pottery rebar of sorts, or if that's what it's supposed to do, or what. But I couldn't quite get this into the shape that I wanted. I got frustrated and I just chose this, and this is what I'm going with. At this point, I'm going to throw it on a hot burner, hope that it dries, and see what happens. All right, here's a quick update. I looked at a few videos just to get a little bit of a reference of how to actually go about processing this clay. And I think I realized one mistake that I've already made. Specifically, these walls are too thin, and apparently with some kind of shrinkage and drying out and whatever, that this is probably going to crack. That's my hypothesis. And over here, I've got my other sort of little sample blobs. Now this burner is on. You can probably see some oil and stuff kind of smoking from it. And these guys are all in the process of drying. As time goes on, I'm going to gradually move all of these closer to the burner and then eventually put them right on there, at which point I'm going to turn this way up. And at that point, hopefully I have some intact ceramics. It's been about 40 minutes, and so far I'm seeing some signs of progress. Got little spots of dry on this side, and then on that edge you can see some definite color difference. I had to turn on the overhead fan because this started fuming. I don't know if it was steam or if it was the perfume from the litter actually vaporizing off. In any case, I didn't really want it floating around my apartment, so I'm evacuating it right now. I'm not seeing much progress on these little two samples. I don't know how much closer I can get these to the burner. I also don't know how much more quickly I can get this to dry out. I think that it would probably be better for me to take this slowly rather than get impatient and try to go too quickly and then have something dry unevenly. I think I'm just going to let this keep going and keep an eye on it. Hopefully I'll be done with this, or at least have this dry tonight. I'm approaching about an hour and a half since I first heated this element up. Since rearranging some stuff, the two samples look like they're just about done. You can see there's just a little bit of moisture right there in the middle. The box still has a little bit of ways to go. You can see it's still pretty moist in there. However, it looks like it's drying a lot faster since I've put it on its edge. I was a little reluctant to do that at first because I didn't know if the base would hold it together in its original shape or if it would just buckle. So far, it looks like it's staying together pretty well. And like I said, now that I've rearranged these pieces of clay to get more surface exposure to this heating element, I'm hoping that it won't be too much longer until all of these are completely dry. It has been just under 2.5 hours since I started drying these, and I think we're just about done. These two samples are dry, and we still got a couple of wet spots on this basket, but for the most part, it's almost done. Just taking a look at some things. Here we've got my first, sample nugget that I used the sifted clay powder from, and I think it turned out beautifully. And it's a nice, consistent, smooth texture. There's almost no cracking on it. There's maybe just a tiny spot right there. But other than that, it just turned out gorgeous. Here's a couple of the small pebbles, the original pebbles, just for comparison. And over here, we've got the little nugget with the uncrushed granules in it. And it still turned out pretty well. It held up better than I expected it to. Although there is quite a bit of cracking going on here. And you can see that the large granules of the litter are still pretty evident in there. You can see them on the surface, just kind of protruding. You can also see them back here as well. And in fact, if you were to take a look in this bowl, you can see various discolored spots where these pebbles are. You can also see them embedded in the walls. Yeah, just in general, you can see where these large granules are. They end up showing up in this little work of art. If I was using a thicker walls, or if I was creating some kind of larger vessel, that probably wouldn't be a big deal. I don't think so anyway. I could be wrong. I could still see the same issue with the granules actually causing some kind of weak point, because these little stress fractures don't get balanced out evenly throughout the entire surface, and they seem to go really just right around the pebbles. I don't know if I would have that issue if I used completely sifted material. In fact, I think I would get something that looked just like this all the way around. So, if you didn't want to go through the hassle of processing all of your kitty litter into small dust, I think it would be quite useful as is. However, if you do have the means to pulverize it, I would highly suggest this, from both an aesthetic and a little bit of a structural perspective as well. I'll go ahead and finish drying this one out, and then I think I will just go ahead and throw these on there, heat this all the way up, and see what happens. Alright, here goes the firing. If I understand this correctly, these are supposed to turn some kind of color. I don't know if they actually start glowing or what, but there should be some kind of definite indication that these have chemically changed. I don't know what I'm supposed to be looking for, but hopefully I'll recognize it when I see it. Yeah, I don't know if that's just my imagination, but it looks like there's a stripe of glow right above the coil of the burner. I don't know if I'm supposed to wait for the entire thing to look like that or what. If it doesn't, I suppose I could just scooch it around a little bit every once in a while. Not sure what to do about that guy back there. Alright, here's how things are going so far. It's been right about an hour and a half, and I just flipped these a minute ago. And you can already see that there are stripes of what look to be fired or cured clay. So if I can actually move this so you can see what I'm talking about. See right there, there's almost like a change to like a brown or a tan. You can see the change in color from the dark gray that it used to be to this tan color. The change is a little bit more pronounced in that bowl right there. You can see originally it was upside down, and the edges were being fired. So now it's currently right side up, and the bottom is getting fired. I don't know what's going to happen as far as that inside though, but so far I think this is a pretty good proof of concept. I ended up calling it quits about 30 minutes after I flipped over to the other side. I don't think any sort of additional time is really necessary. After the 30 minutes on the other side, I just gradually tapered off the heat until the stove was pretty much just all the way off. as you can see, I didn't end up firing or curing the clay all the way, but I think it still turned out pretty well. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's somewhat. I don't know. Don't really know how to say it. It has a little bit of a pottery sound. At the same time, it's also not finished in some places. I don't know if I'm going to end up using this for anything practical or whatever, but like I said earlier, I think it's a pretty neat proof of concept. Let's go ahead. Try it out yourself.